I never imagined that while I was dying in a hospital bed, my own children would be in the next bathroom, planning to speed up my death with poison, just to get their hands on my $8 million inheritance. Before we continue, subscribe to William's Revenge Stories and hit the notification bell because we have new stories every day. Leave a like and tell us in the comments what city you are watching from. My name is Arthur Vance Morgan. I am 67 years old, and until March 15th, 2024, I believed I had raised 2 children who loved me. That Sunday night, everything changed forever. I was eating dinner peacefully in my home on Lake Shore Drive, enjoying the fluffy omelet I had made just like I do every Sunday. It was a tradition I kept ever since my dear Rose passed away 5 years ago. I always cooked to remember her because she used to say my omelets were better than hers, even though I knew she was just lying to be sweet. Suddenly, it felt like an elephant was sitting on my chest. The pain was so intense that the fork fell from my hands, making a metallic sound that echoed in the silent dining room. I tried to stand up, but my legs wouldn't respond. My left arm ached like thousands of needles were stabbing me, and my breath caught with every attempt to get air. "My God," I murmured as I fell to my knees by the table. With the little strength I had left, I managed to reach my cell phone and dial 911. "I need an ambulance," I managed to say, my voice breaking. "I think I'm having a heart attack." The next few minutes were a blur of pain and confusion. I remember calling Sandra, my oldest daughter, 42 years old, and also Robert, my younger son, 39. They both arrived at almost the same time as the ambulance, with worried faces that, at that moment, deeply reassured me. "Dad, everything is going to be okay," Sandra told me while the paramedics lifted me onto the gurney. Her eyes were full of tears, or at least, that's what it looked like to me in my state. Robert ran alongside the ambulance all the way to Street Charles Hospital, repeating, "Hang on, Dad, hang on, we need you." Those words gave me strength during the ride. I thought about how lucky I was to have such dedicated children so worried about my well-being. Once at the hospital, everything became a whirlwind of doctors, nurses, cables, and machines that beeped constantly. The doctor, Ivan Carter, my trusted cardiologist for 10 years, appeared quickly and took control of the situation. "Arthur, you've had a myocardial infarction," he explained with that professional seriousness he always maintained. "But you got here in time. We are going to stabilize you, and you'll stay for observation for a few days." They assigned me room 304, a private room with a view of the hospital's inner courtyard. Sandra and Robert didn't leave my side during the first few hours, taking turns holding my hand and whispering words of encouragement. As they hooked me up to the IV and the medications to stabilize my heart, I heard their voices as a comforting murmur in the background. They talked between themselves about calling some relatives, about organizing themselves to stay with me over the next few days, about how important it was for me to recover quickly. "We'll do whatever it takes to make sure Dad is okay," I heard Sandra say. "Yes, whatever it takes," Robert confirmed. At that moment, with my heart still beating irregularly and connected to those machines monitoring every beat, I felt profoundly grateful. Despite the scare, despite the pain, I had my children with me. I thought about Rose and how proud she would be to see how our children had grown up to be such loving and responsible people. The sedative started to take effect and my vision became increasingly blurry. Sandra and Robert's voices faded slowly as I sank into a state between sleep and wakefulness. It was then that I heard something that would change my life forever. At first I thought they were hallucinations caused by the medication, but their voices became clearer, closer. They were talking near my bed, believing I was completely sedated. "How much time do you think he has left?" whispered a voice I recognized as Robert's. "I don't know, but I hope it's not much," Sandra replied, in a tone I had never heard from her before. My heart, already weak, gave a jolt that the machines registered immediately. But I pretended to stay asleep, with all my senses now completely alert, waiting to hear more of this conversation that had begun to terrify me. The medication kept me in a strange state, like floating between consciousness and sleep, but every word that came out of my children's mouths reached my ears with a clarity that chilled my blood. "Look, Sandra," Robert murmured, moving closer to my bed. "The machines show he's stable, but at this age, anything can happen." "I know," she replied with a coldness I had never noticed in her voice before. "I've been thinking about the properties. The condo on the Gold Coast is valued at almost $2 million, and yours on Michigan Avenue is $2.5. My breathing remained shallow and controlled, but inside I felt like I was being stabbed. These were the properties I had given them when they got married, properties that were still in my name because I wanted to make sure they never had financial problems. Besides, there are the $8 million in the bank accounts, Sandra continued. I reviewed the documents when I was cleaning his office last month. Everything is very well organized. Robert moved even closer, so close I could feel his breath. And what about the current will? It favors us mostly, as it should, Sandra replied with a satisfaction that turned my stomach. But you know, as long as he's alive, he can change it whenever he wants. There was a heavy silence that stretched for several minutes. The only sounds were the constant beeping of the machines and the distant footsteps of nurses in the hallway. I kept my eyes closed, controlling my breathing to seem natural, even though my heart was beating so hard I feared the machines would give me away. "Come with me to the bathroom," Sandra whispered suddenly. "We need to talk more privately." I heard their footsteps moving away toward the small private bathroom in my room. The door closed with a soft click, but their voices, though quieter, still reached me. "Robert, I've been thinking," I heard Sandra say. "Dad is very weak. The doctors said another heart attack could be fatal, so what are you proposing?" Robert asked in a tone I couldn't quite decipher. "Well, hospitals are places where a lot of things happen. Patients his age, with heart problems, sometimes don't recover as we expect." The silence that followed was deafening. My mind refused to process what I was hearing. These were my children, the babies I had held in my arms, the ones I had taught to walk, the ones I had paid for the best schools and universities. "Sandra, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" Robert whispered. "I'm just saying that if his condition worsened naturally, it would be a blessing for him. He wouldn't have to suffer anymore, and we could honor his memory in the best way possible," she replied. Her voice so sweet it contrasted horribly with her words. "But how? The doctors, the nurses, there are cameras everywhere. Tomorrow I'll bring some natural things. Herbs that can be problematic for someone with his heart condition. No one would suspect a thing. It would be like his heart just couldn't take it anymore." My entire body tensed. I had to make a superhuman effort not to open my eyes and scream that I had heard everything. These monsters, because that's what they were planning to murder me for money. "Are you sure it will work?" Robert asked, and his question confirmed to me that they were both in agreement with this diabolical plan. "Completely. I have a friend who's a pharmacist who explained about certain substances that can cause fatal arrhythmias. Mixed with the IV, they would be undetectable in a routine autopsy. It would look like a natural death. And when? Tomorrow night, during the shift change. The nurses are always busy between 8 and 9. We would have enough time." Robert sighed deeply. "If we do this, it has to be perfect. We can't risk anything going wrong." "It won't go wrong," Sandra assured him with a confidence that terrified me. "I've been planning this ever since he started talking about reviewing the will last year. We can't let him donate everything to those stupid charities like he threatened to do after Mom died." They returned to the room and approached my bed again. Sandra touched my forehead with a fake tenderness that made me nauseous. "Poor Dad," she murmured. "Let's hope he doesn't suffer much." "Yeah," Robert added. "May he rest in peace soon." They stayed for a few more minutes, talking about visiting hours and who would stay with me during the night. It all sounded so normal, so full of love, that anyone hearing them would think they were the most devoted children in the world. When they finally left, promising to return early in the morning, I was left alone with my thoughts and the constant sound of the machines monitoring my betrayed heart. Tears ran silently down my cheeks as I processed the magnitude of what I had discovered. My own children, my own flesh and blood, were willing to kill me for money. Rose had always warned me that I was spoiling them too much, that I gave them everything without teaching them the value of work and sacrifice, but never, not even in my worst nightmares, did I imagine they would go this far. The early morning in the hospital was the longest of my entire life. Every second dragged on like an eternity, while my mind struggled to accept the reality I had discovered. The constant beeping of the heart monitors had become a sinister soundtrack, accompanying my darkest thoughts. I looked at the digital clock on the wall, 3:47 a.m. on March 16th. The nurses came by every hour to check my vital signs, but between those visits, I was completely alone with the most devastating truth I had ever faced. Rose, my beloved wife, always had a special intuition for reading people. I vividly remembered a conversation we had 3 years before her death, when Sandra came to Rose asking for money to invest in a business. Rose had taken me aside and whispered, "Arthur, that girl has greedy eyes. Be careful." I had defended our daughter, arguing she just needed support to get started. I transferred $50,000 to her that same week. The business mysteriously failed in 2 months, and Sandra never mentioned paying the money back. Then it was Robert, always with elaborate excuses about unique opportunities that required small loans from his father. Over the last 5 years, I had calculated mentally. I had given each of them more than $200,000 in various allowances, not counting the properties that were still in my name, but where they lived rent-free. Tears rolled down my cheeks again as I remembered the last serious conversation I had with Rose before cancer took her. She was in her hospital bed, looking fragile but with that penetrating gaze she always had. "Arthur," she had said, taking my hand with her already weak fingers, "promise me you'll be careful with Sandra and Robert when I'm gone. I love them deeply, but they've grown up expecting everything to be given to them without effort. That can turn people into something we don't want them to be." I had promised her I would be careful, but after her death, the loneliness and pain made me seek my children's constant company. I gave them everything they asked for, believing it would guarantee their love and presence. How naive I had been. Now, hooked up to these machines, I understood that my excessive generosity hadn't bought love. It had bought toxic dependency and boundless ambition. To Sandra and Robert, I was not their beloved father. I was an obstacle between them and a fortune they considered theirs by right. The physical pain of the heart attack paled in comparison to this emotional agony. I felt as if my heart had been ripped out, not with a scalpel but with bare hands. But as the hours passed slowly, something began to change inside me. The initial shock and sadness started to transform into something colder, more calculating. Rose always said I had an exceptional analytical mind for business, and now that same strategic ability was beginning to activate. If Sandra and Robert thought they could murder me and inherit my fortune, they were gravely mistaken. I hadn't built an $8 million estate by being passive or naive in business. I had survived economic crises, ruthless competitors, and treacherous partners. My own children would be no different. I remembered where I kept my cell phone, in the drawer of the nightstand, hidden under some magazines I had brought from home. The nurses had told me I could use it, but to keep the volume low so as not to disturb other patients. Very carefully, I checked that no one was in the hallway and took out the device. My hands were shaking slightly, not just from the effects of the medication, but from the adrenaline rushing through my veins. I needed evidence. Without proof of what I had heard, any accusation I made would sound like the delirium of a sick old man. But if I managed to record a similar conversation, I would have something concrete to work with. I opened the voice recording app that Robert himself had taught me to use last year, when I wanted to record some business ideas. The irony was bitter. My own son had given me the tool that could destroy his plans. I set the phone to start recording with just a touch of the screen, and placed it strategically under the magazines, with the microphone aimed toward where Sandra and Robert had been standing during their previous conversation. Then I practiced my performance. I had to appear completely unconscious, sedated by the medication, while remaining alert to capture every detail of their future conversations. It was a performance that could save my life. I also began to plan my next moves. Martha Jennings, my trusted lawyer for 15 years, had to be contacted immediately. She knew all the details of my estate and had drafted my current will. If anyone could help me protect myself legally, it was her. I thought about the properties. Sandra's on the Gold Coast, a 1900 square foot penthouse in one of Chicago's most exclusive areas, and Robert's on Michigan Avenue, a 2300 square foot duplex overlooking the park. Both properties were completely in my name, with occupancy agreements I could cancel at any time. The monthly transfers too, $3,000 to each of them, deposited faithfully on the 15th of every month into their personal accounts. Money they used to maintain a standard of living that their part-time jobs could never support. All of that could end with a few phone calls and some signed documents. But first, I needed more information. I had to fully understand the extent of their plan, who else might be involved, and above all get irrefutable proof of their homicidal intentions. Dawn began to filter through my room's window. Soon Sandra and Robert would return, probably with fake worried faces and sweet words that I now knew were completely false. But this time I would be ready. This time, the hunter had become the prey, and my dear children had no idea that their victim was watching them with eyes wide open. The war had begun, and they had just awakened the most dangerous adversary they could have imagined, a betrayed father with resources, connections, and now nothing to lose. At 8 a.m. on March 16th, Sandra and Robert entered my room with perfectly rehearsed expressions of concern. They brought coffee and some magazines, acting like the model children the world believed them to be. "Good morning, Dad," Sandra whispered, approaching my bed. "How are you feeling this morning?" I kept my eyes closed and breathed slowly, mimicking the pattern of someone just starting to wake from a deep sleep. My left hand rested naturally on the magazines hiding my phone, ready to activate the recording as soon as necessary. "He's very quiet," Robert murmured. "The medication really has him sedated." "Better this way," Sandra replied with that coldness I now recognized perfectly. "We don't want him to suffer unnecessarily." They moved toward the window, apparently to open the curtains and let in more natural light, but I knew it was their way of moving away from my bed to speak more freely. "Did you bring what we talked about last night?" Robert asked in a very low voice. I discreetly touched my phone screen to activate the recording. The device vibrated slightly, confirming it had started capturing audio. "Of course," Sandra replied. "I have everything ready in my purse. Laura, my pharmacist friend, gave me exactly what we need. They are concentrated extracts of oleander and digitalis. In small amounts, they'll cause a severe arrhythmia that his weak heart won't be able to handle. And you're sure it won't be detectable?" "Completely. These compounds metabolize quickly. By the time they do any post-mortem analysis, it will look like a completely natural death caused by cardiac complications." My heart sped up dangerously, so much so that I feared the machines would alert them to my agitated state. But I managed to control my breathing and maintain an appearance of absolute calm. "What time are you planning to do it?" Robert asked. "Tonight, around 9. The nurse's shift change is at 8:30. There's always a 20-minute period where they're busy passing on information and organizing medications. It will be our perfect moment. And after? We'll act like children devastated by the unexpected loss of our dear father. We'll cry, accept condolences, organize a beautiful funeral. In 3 months, when everything has calmed down, we'll start liquidating properties and transferring accounts." The cynicism in her voice made me sick. This person speaking so coldly about my murder was the same little girl I had carried in my arms when she had nightmares, the same one who asked me to read her bedtime stories. "Have you thought about how we'll divide everything?" Robert asked. 50-50, as we've always agreed. 4 million for each of us, plus the value of the properties when we sell them. But we'll have to be smart about the inheritance taxes. And what if someone suspects something? Who is going to suspect? Dad is 67, just had a severe heart attack, and is in a hospital surrounded by medical professionals. It will be the most natural death in the world. They approached my bed again. Sandra touched my forehead with a softness that now deeply repulsed me. "Poor thing," she murmured. "He looks so fragile. It really will be a blessing when his suffering ends." "Yes," Robert added. "He won't have to worry about anything anymore." They stayed with me for 2 more hours, taking turns holding my hand and whispering loving words that sounded hollow and false. Occasionally they spoke with the nurses, asking about my progress and showing a concern I now knew was completely fake. At 10:30, Sandra announced she had to leave to take care of some personal matters. Robert offered to stay until noon, when she would return. Once Sandra left, Robert visibly relaxed. He took out his phone and started making calls he didn't expect me to be able to hear. "Hello, Carlos," he said in a low voice. "Yes, it's about what we discussed last week. We'll probably be able to proceed sooner than we thought. No, I can't give details over the phone, but let's just say certain circumstances have accelerated. Perfect. Keep everything ready." Another call followed immediately. "Mercedes? It's Robert. About the appraisal of my father's properties? Yes, we'll need those numbers very soon. This week. Excellent." Every call was another stab in my heart. Not only had they planned my death, but they had already started organizing the liquidation of my estate. They had accomplices, professionals who would help them process my inheritance as efficiently as possible. When he finally left at noon, promising to return in the afternoon, I was left alone with a recording that contained enough evidence to ruin their lives forever. With trembling hands, I stopped the recording and checked its quality. It was perfect. Every word, every detail of their diabolical plan had been captured with crystal clarity. Now I needed to act quickly. I looked in my contacts for Martha Jennings' number and dialed with the volume at its minimum. "Arthur?" she answered after the second ring. "How are you? I heard about your heart attack. I was planning to visit you this afternoon." "Martha," I whispered, "I need you to come immediately. It's a life or death legal emergency. Literally. What's wrong? You sound very upset. I can't explain over the phone. Just come to Street Charles Hospital, room 304. And Martha, bring everything needed to make immediate changes to my will and the property agreements." "Arthur, you're scaring me. Is everything okay?" "No, Martha, nothing is okay. But when you hear what I have to show you, you'll understand why I need to act immediately. I'll be there in an hour. In the meantime, don't talk to anyone else about this. Don't worry. No one else can know we're talking." I hung up and hid the phone under the magazines again. My heart was racing, but for the first time since last night it wasn't just from fear or sadness. It was from determination. Sandra and Robert had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated their father. They thought I was a frail, trusting old man who would be easy to eliminate. But I hadn't gotten where I was by being naive or passive. The war they had declared was about to turn against them in ways they could never have imagined. Martha Jennings arrived at the hospital exactly 1 hour after my call, as had always been her habit during the 15 years she had been handling my legal affairs. I saw her enter the hallway with her professional briefcase, that serious expression she adopted when she knew she was facing something important. "Arthur," she whispered as she entered my room. "What on earth is going on? You sounded desperate on the phone." I sat up slightly in bed and took my phone out from under the magazines. "Martha, what you are about to hear will change everything you thought you knew about my children. But before I play this, I need you to swear as my lawyer that you will maintain absolute confidentiality until we decide how to proceed." "You know you have my word and my professional privilege," she replied, sitting in the chair next to my bed. "But you have me very worried." I handed her my phone's earbuds and played the entire recording of the morning's conversation. I watched her face as she listened, seeing her expression change from curiosity to absolute horror. When the playback finished, she took off the earbuds with trembling hands. "My God, Arthur, this is a plan for premeditated murder." "Exactly. And according to what I heard, they plan to execute it tonight during the nurse's shift change." Martha stood up and began pacing the room, processing the information. "We have to call the police immediately. This recording is enough evidence to arrest them for conspiracy to commit murder." "No," I replied firmly. "If we involve the authorities now, it will become a public scandal. The media will find out, and I prefer to handle this more strategically. What do you propose then? First, I need to get out of this hospital before 9 o'clock tonight. Is it possible to arrange an urgent medical transfer?" Martha opened her briefcase and took out her tablet. "I know Dr. Carter from other cases. If he authorizes a transfer for medical complications, we could move you to Mercy Hospital this afternoon." "Perfect. And second, I want you to immediately prepare all the documents to revoke my current will and create a completely new one." "Are you sure? That's a very drastic step." "Martha, my children are planning to murder me for money. There is nothing more drastic than that." She nodded and began taking notes on her tablet. "What are your instructions for the new will?" "I want my entire fortune, the $8 million in bank accounts plus all the properties, to be donated to 3 cancer charities: the American Cancer Society, Mercy Hospital, and the National Cancer Institute. And Sandra and Robert? Completely excluded. Not $1. Also, I want you to immediately cancel the occupancy agreements for their properties. They have 72 hours to vacate the properties." Martha stopped writing and looked at me directly. "Arthur, I understand your pain and anger, but are you sure you want to make such permanent decisions while you are emotionally distressed?" "Martha, do you have children?" "Yes, 2. Could you forgive either of them if you discovered they were planning to murder you for money?" She was silent for a long moment. "No," she admitted finally. "I probably couldn't." "Then you understand why these decisions are not emotional. They are the only logical response to a betrayal of this magnitude." At that moment, my phone vibrated with a text message from Sandra. "Dad, I'll be at the hospital at 6 to stay with you tonight. Robert will come after 8. We love you very much. I showed the message to Martha. See? She's confirming exactly what we heard on the recording. They plan to be here when they execute their plan. All right, Martha said, packing her things. I'm going to speak with Dr. Carter immediately about the transfer. In the meantime, you keep up the act of being sedated. They can't suspect that anything has changed. How long do you need to prepare all the legal documents? Given the urgency, I can have everything ready by tomorrow morning, but I'll need witnesses for the signatures. Dr. Carter can be one. Can you get another? My associate Carmen Ruiz can come. She is also a registered notary. Martha headed for the door but stopped before leaving. Arthur, one more thing. Do you want us to also record the conversation tonight when they come to visit you? It won't be necessary. By the time they realize what has happened, it will be too late to do anything. After Martha left, I was left to reflect on the steps I was taking. Part of me still couldn't believe it had come to this. These were the children I had raised, whom I had loved unconditionally for decades. But I remembered Sandra's exact words from that morning. It really will be a blessing when his suffering ends. She wasn't talking about my physical or emotional pain. She was specifically referring to the inconvenience my existence posed to their financial plans. At 3 in the afternoon, Dr. Carter entered my room with a concerned expression that seemed genuine. Arthur, your lawyer explained to me that there are some family complications that require your immediate transfer to another institution. Medically, you are stable for the move, but are you sure it's necessary? Doctor, it is absolutely necessary. My life could be in danger if I remain here tonight. He frowned. Your life? What kind of danger are you talking about? I showed him my phone with the recording. Doctor, what you are about to hear may be disturbing, but I need you to understand why the transfer is urgent. After listening to the entire recording, Dr. Carter was silent for several minutes. Arthur, this is unbelievable. Are you absolutely sure those are your children's voices? Absolutely sure. I've known them since they were born. In that case, I will arrange the transfer immediately. Officially, it will be for cardiovascular complications requiring specialized monitoring. No one will question my medical decision. What time can we do it? At 5 p.m. That will give us enough time for you to be fully settled at Mercy before your children arrive here tonight. The irony was perfect. While Sandra and Robert were preparing to execute their murderous plan, their victim would be safe in another hospital, preparing the complete destruction of their lives as they knew them. The hunter had definitively become the prey, and they had no idea what was coming for them. At 5 p.m. sharp, a private ambulance arrived at Street Charles Hospital to transfer me. Dr. Carter had coordinated everything perfectly, presenting my case as a cardiovascular complication that required specialized care in the advanced cardiology unit at Mercy Hospital. The patient is presenting intermittent arrhythmias that need continuous monitoring with more sophisticated equipment, he explained to the nurses as they prepared my transfer. The family will be notified once he is stabilized at the new facility. As they transported me on the gurney toward the ambulance, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. I was escaping an assassination attempt orchestrated by my own children, but at the same time, I was definitively abandoning any hope of maintaining a normal family relationship. The journey to Mercy was silent. The paramedics routinely monitored my vital signs, unaware that their patient was not just an elderly man with heart problems, but a man who had just discovered the deepest betrayal that could exist. Upon arriving at the new hospital, I was assigned to room 812 on the 8th floor, a private suite with a panoramic view of Chicago that Martha had specifically requested. The atmosphere was calmer than the previous hospital, with wide hallways and staff who seemed less rushed. The head nurse, a middle-aged woman named Patricia Morales, personally handled my check-in. Mr. Morgan, Dr. Carter has informed us about your condition. We will be monitoring you 24 hours a day, and we have specific instructions that only authorized personnel can be given information about your location. Thank you, Patricia. That is exactly what I need right now. At 6:30, Martha arrived, accompanied by her associate Carmen Ruiz, an elegant woman of about 40 who was carrying a notary's briefcase. How are you feeling, Arthur? Martha asked while Carmen organized documents on the side table in my room. Physically fine, emotionally shattered, but mentally clearer than ever, I replied, sitting up in the new bed. I have prepared all the documents you requested, Martha continued. The new will, the revocation of the old one, the cancellations of the occupancy agreements, and the orders to suspend all automatic bank transfers. Carmen approached with the papers. Mr. Morgan, before we proceed, I must ask you as a notary, are you making these decisions of your own free will, without coercion of any kind, and with a full understanding of the consequences? Completely. In fact, I want you to hear something that justifies every one of these decisions. I played the full recording for Carmen. Her reaction was similar to Martha's. Initial disbelief, followed by absolute horror. In my 20 years as a notary, I have never witnessed anything like this, Carmen murmured. This fully justifies any decision you want to make regarding your estate. We began the process of signing documents. The new will was a masterpiece of legal precision that Martha had drafted in record time. Every clause was designed to be legally ironclad and to maximize the benefit to the selected charities. The American Cancer Society will receive $3 million, Martha explained as I signed. Mercy Hospital will receive $3 million for oncology research, and the National Cancer Institute will receive $2 million plus the value of all real estate properties. What about Sandra and Robert's properties? Those go into immediate liquidation. I have contacted a luxury real estate agency that can put them on the market tomorrow. Given their prime locations, they should sell quickly. Carmen finished authenticating the signatures and stamping the documents. Everything is perfectly legal and registered. These documents completely nullify any previous will and clearly establish the new provisions. And the notifications to Sandra and Robert? I have scheduled the calls for tomorrow at 9 a.m., Martha replied. I will inform them of the changes and give them 72 hours to vacate the properties. At that moment, my phone vibrated with multiple messages. They were from Sandra and Robert, sent from Street Charles Hospital. Sandra, Dad, I got to the hospital and they say you were transferred. Where to? Are you okay? Robert, Dad, nobody will tell us where you are. We are very worried. Please answer. Sandra, I've called every hospital in Chicago. Tell me where you are so I can come see you. I showed the messages to Martha and Carmen. You see? They are desperate because they can't execute their plan if they don't know where I am. Are you going to answer them? Martha asked. Not until tomorrow, after they receive the legal notifications. I want them to spend tonight wondering what went wrong with their perfect plan. Carmen put all the original documents in her briefcase. Mr. Morgan, these documents will be filed with the notary registry first thing tomorrow. From that moment on, they will be completely irrevocable without your direct consent. Perfect. Is there anything else we need to do tonight? Just one thing, Martha said. I have coordinated with the bank to suspend all automatic transfers starting tomorrow. I have also notified the property management that the occupancy agreements have been canceled. At 8 p.m., exactly when Sandra and Robert would have been preparing to execute their homicidal plan, I was eating dinner peacefully in my new room, protected by medical staff who knew nothing about my children, in a place where they could not find me. The irony was delicious. While they were probably running around Chicago searching hospitals, calling medical contacts, and trying to understand what had gone wrong, I was signing the documents that would completely destroy their lives as they knew them. Patricia, the head nurse, came in to check my vitals. How are you feeling, Mr. Morgan? Your numbers look much better than when you arrived. I feel like I've avoided a catastrophe, I replied honestly. That's wonderful. Sometimes a change of environment is exactly what a patient needs to begin their true recovery. She had no idea how true her observation was. My recovery wasn't just physical. It was emotional, psychological, and spiritual. For the first time in years, I felt free from the toxic expectations and manipulation of my children. After the medical staff left for the night, I was left alone with my thoughts and the satisfaction of knowing that Sandra and Robert were experiencing their first night of true panic. Tomorrow would be the day of revelations, when they would discover that the father they had planned to murder had not only survived, but had counterattacked in a way more devastating than they could have ever imagined. The war had officially begun, and I had just won the first battle without them even knowing we were fighting. The early morning of March 19th passed with a tranquility I hadn't experienced in days. I woke up naturally at 6 a.m., without the constant jolts of fear that had characterized my last few nights. The staff at Mercy Hospital was discreet and professional, allowing me to rest without unnecessary interruptions. Dr. Carter arrived early to make his usual medical rounds, checked my vitals, and seemed satisfied with my progress. Arthur, your cardiac parameters have improved considerably since the transfer, he observed while examining the monitors. How are you feeling emotionally? Surprisingly well, doctor. I think getting away from the previous environment has benefited me more than I expected. Excellent. Emotional stress can be just as detrimental to cardiac recovery as any physical factor. He had no idea how accurate his comment was. The stress of knowing my own children were planning to murder me had been replaced by the satisfaction of knowing I had total control over the situation. At 8 a.m., Martha arrived, accompanied by Carmen and a third man I didn't immediately recognize. Arthur, this is Edward Samuels from the Chicago Notary Registry, Carmen said. He is here to personally oversee the registration of all the documents we signed last night. Edward, a distinguished man of about 50, approached with an official folder. Mr. Morgan, it's an honor to meet you. I have reviewed all the documentation prepared by your lawyer, and I want to confirm one more time that you fully understand the implications of these estate changes. Completely, Mr. Samuels. I have made these decisions with full awareness of their consequences. Perfect. We will proceed then with the official registration. Over the next hour, Edward meticulously registered each document in the notary system. The new will, the revocation of the old one, the contract cancellations, and all the bank orders were officially established and irrevocable. Mr. Morgan, Edward explained as he stamped the last papers. As of this moment, these documents have full legal force. Any attempt to challenge them will require proof of mental incompetence or coercion, which will be impossible to prove given the documented circumstances. Martha opened her tablet and showed me a series of confirmations she had received that morning. The banking institutions have confirmed the suspension of all automatic transfers, effective immediately. The properties have been officially removed from the occupancy agreements and are being prepared for immediate sale. What about the real estate agencies? I've contacted Premium Properties Chicago, specializing in luxury real estate. They will appraise both properties this afternoon and can have them on the market by tomorrow. Given the prime locations, they expect competitive offers in less than a week. Carmen checked her watch. It's 10 minutes to 9. Are you ready for us to begin the notifications? I felt a mix of anticipation and sadness. This moment would mark the point of no return in my relationship with Sandra and Robert. Once they knew what I had discovered and the actions I had taken, any possibility of reconciliation would disappear forever. But I remembered their exact words from that terrible morning, the ease with which they had planned my death, the coldness with which they had calculated my suffering versus their financial gain. These were not my children. They were strangers who shared my last name and had inherited my DNA, but not my values or my humanity. I'm ready, I declared firmly. Martha dialed Sandra's number first. She put the phone on speaker so we could all hear the conversation. Martha, Sandra answered after the first ring. Her voice sounded tense and exhausted. Do you know where my father is? We've been looking for him all night. Good morning, Sandra. I am calling you on specific instructions from your father to inform you of important decisions he has made regarding his estate. What decisions? Where is he? Why can't we see him? Your father has decided to completely revoke his previous will and establish new estate provisions. Effective immediately, you and your brother have been totally excluded from any inheritance. The silence that followed was so deep I thought the call had dropped. What are you saying? Sandra finally stammered. Furthermore, the occupancy agreement for your condo on the Gold Coast has been canceled. You have 72 hours to completely vacate the property. That's impossible. My father wouldn't do that. Are you lying? All monthly transfers you were receiving have also been suspended. The last one was processed on March 15th. I want to speak with him immediately. I demand to know where he is. Your father does not wish to have contact with you at this time. All legal documents have been duly registered and are irrevocable. This can't be happening. I'm going to sue. I'm going to contest everything. You have the right to try, Sandra, but I warn you that any legal process will require significant financial resources, resources you will no longer be receiving from your father. The call cut off abruptly. Sandra had hung up, probably in a state of complete shock. A predictable reaction, Carmen observed. Denial, anger, legal threats. It's the typical pattern when someone unexpectedly loses an inheritance. Martha immediately dialed Robert's number. "Martha," he answered with an anxious voice, "please tell me you know something about Dad." "Good morning, Robert. I'm calling to inform you about estate changes your father has decided to implement." She repeated the exact same information she had given Sandra. Robert's reaction was different. A long silence followed by a bitter laugh. "I see," he said finally. "Dad found something out, didn't he? I am not authorized to discuss the reasons for his decisions. You don't need to. His timing says it all." His voice had taken on a cold tone I hadn't heard before. "Tell my dear father that this isn't over." "Is that a threat, Robert?" "It's a promise. Sandra and I are not going to stand by while he takes away what is rightfully ours. I remind you that nothing was rightfully yours. It was all generosity from your father, generosity he had the right to withdraw at any time." Robert hung up without replying. Edward had been taking notes during both conversations. "Mr. Morgan, I recommend we document these reactions officially. Your son's threats could be relevant if they attempt future legal action." "Do it?" I nodded. "I want everything on record." Martha consulted her notes. "The official written notifications will be delivered to their residences this afternoon by certified mail. I have also coordinated with private security to supervise the evictions if necessary." "Private security?" "Arthur, you just took away properties valued at over $4 million and an $8 million inheritance. People react in unpredictable ways when they lose sums that large. It was a sensible precaution. Sandra and Robert had proven they were capable of planning a murder. It wasn't unreasonable to think they might try other forms of revenge." Carmen began to pack up the finalized documents. "Mr. Morgan, is there anything else you need done today?" "Yes," I replied after thinking. "I want you to prepare a detailed letter explaining exactly why I made these decisions. Not for Sandra and Robert, but for the official record. If anything should happen to me in the future, I want it to be clear that these decisions were made for specific, justified reasons." "Excellent idea," Edward approved. "That letter will be invaluable if they try to legally challenge your decisions post-mortem." As the professionals finished their work, I was left to reflect on what I had just done. In less than 24 hours, I had completely destroyed the lives Sandra and Robert had built based on my generosity. But I didn't feel guilt. I felt justice. They had chosen to see me as an obstacle to wealth, rather than as the father who had loved them unconditionally. Now they would face the consequences of that choice in the most direct way possible. March 21st dawned cloudy in Chicago, as if the weather had decided to accompany the drama that was about to unfold. From my room at Mercy Hospital, I watched the city wake up as I mentally prepared for what would be one of the most decisive days of my life. Patricia, my head nurse, had noticed my mood during the morning checkup. "You look different today, Mr. Morgan. More determined." "Today is the day certain truths come to light," I replied, as she noted my vitals on the medical chart. "Your numbers are excellent. Your heart has strengthened considerably since you arrived here." It wasn't just my physical heart that had strengthened. It was my resolve, my mental clarity, and my determination to get justice by my own means. At 8:30 a.m., I received a text message I had been waiting for. It was from the certified mail company Martha had hired. Documents delivered successfully to both addresses. Gold Coast Condo, Unit 12A, received by Sandra Morgan Ruiz at 8:15. A.M. Michigan Avenue Duplex, Unit 8B. Received by Robert Morgan Ruiz at 8:22 a.m. Perfect. Now they had in their hands the official written notifications of everything Martha had told them over the phone yesterday. The documents detailed their new circumstances specifically. Total exclusion from the will, cancellation of the occupancy agreements, suspension of monthly transfers, and a 72-hour deadline to vacate the properties. My phone started ringing immediately. It was Sandra. I decided not to answer. Instead, I watched as the screen lit up again and again with successive calls. Sandra, Robert, Sandra, again. An unknown number, which was probably one of them using another phone. Then, text messages that started out pleading and quickly turned threatening. Sandra, Dad, please pick up. Can we fix this? Robert, Dad, answer the phone. We need to talk urgently. Sandra, this is ridiculous. We are your children. You can't do this to us. Robert, if you don't answer, we're going to find ways to find you. The tone of the messages became progressively more desperate and aggressive. It was fascinating to watch their true personalities emerge when they felt cornered. At 9:30, Martha arrived with an expression mixing professional satisfaction with personal concern. The couriers confirmed the deliveries, she informed me as she sat by my bed. Both received the documents personally, so they cannot claim they weren't properly notified. Have you heard from them? Oh, yes. Sandra called my office 4 times between 8:30 and 9. My secretary followed instructions to forward all her calls to my voicemail. And what did the messages say? Martha took out her phone and played the first message. It was Sandra's voice, but distorted by tears and hysteria. Martha, this is a nightmare. My father can't be in his right mind. No one changes a will so drastically without being manipulated. I need to know where he is to talk to him. This must be your doing. You are taking advantage of a vulnerable old man. The second message was from Robert, and his tone was completely different. Cold, calculating, threatening. Martha, I don't know what game you're playing, but this isn't going to stand. My father built his fortune with our help, with our support all these years. We will not allow an ambitious lawyer to take advantage of his deteriorated mental state to benefit charities he doesn't even know. Interesting, I observed after hearing both messages. Sandra resorts to emotional manipulation and accuses of undue influence. Robert goes straight to veiled threats and tries to rewrite family history. Exactly the pattern I expected, Martha confirmed. I have documented everything officially. Any future attempt to challenge your decisions will have to face these recordings as evidence of their true motivations. At that moment, my phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize, but I decided to answer out of curiosity. Dad? It was Sandra's voice, clearly calling from another phone. Please, don't hang up. We need to talk. Hello, Sandra, I replied in a calm voice. How are you this morning? How do you think I am? I just received documents telling me I've lost my inheritance and I have 3 days to leave my home. What is going on? I think you know exactly what's going on. There was a long pause. I could hear her ragged breathing on the other end of the line. Dad, if this is about something we said at the hospital, you have to understand, we were under a lot of stress. We weren't serious about any of it. Something you said? Sandra, I heard you plan my murder in detail. I heard how you were going to poison my IV. I heard how you had already calculated the division of my inheritance. Another pause. Longer this time. That's not what we meant. We were speaking hypothetically, trying to process the fear of losing you. Hypothetically? Bringing poison to the hospital is hypothetical? Calculating the exact moment of the nurse's shift change is hypothetical? Dad, please, we can explain everything. Just give us a chance to see you and clear up this misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding, Sandra. There is a complete recording of your conversation. There is irrefutable evidence of your intentions. The silence that followed was so profound I thought she had hung up. A recording? She whispered finally. A complete recording, with dates, times, and clearly identifiable voices. A recording that is in my lawyer's possession and will be presented in any court if you try to challenge my decisions. This can't be happening, Sandra murmured. This can't be real. It's as real as your plan to kill me for $8 million. We were never going to actually do anything. We were just venting. Venting? Getting specific poisons from a pharmacist is venting? Planning the exact time and method of execution is venting? Sandra started to cry, but it didn't move me anymore. These tears weren't from genuine regret. They were from panic at having lost her source of income and her inheritance. Dad, we are your children. You raised us. You love us. You can't destroy our lives over one stupid conversation we never would have acted on. Sandra, you already destroyed any relationship we could have had the moment you decided my death would be convenient for your finances. Please, Dad. Please, we're begging you. Robert is here with me. We can go wherever you are and fix this together, as a family. We are not a family. Families don't plan murders among their members. You are 2 strangers who share my last name and who turned out to be capable of premeditated homicide. Don't say that. Of course we're family. Killers are not my family, Sandra. I hung up the phone and immediately put it on silent mode. I had no interest in hearing any more pleas, threats, or attempts at manipulation. Martha had been listening to the entire conversation. Arthur, that call was perfect. You have made it completely clear that you know their intentions and that your decisions are a direct consequence of their actions. Do you think they'll try something desperate? It's possible. That's why I've coordinated with private security to watch both the properties and the area around this hospital. If they try to locate you here, they will be stopped immediately. The rest of the day passed with a constant succession of missed calls, increasingly frantic text messages, and, as Martha informed me, visits from Sandra and Robert to her office, demanding information about my whereabouts. But I remained calm, protected, and completely in control of the situation. For the first time in years, my children couldn't manipulate me, they couldn't emotionally blackmail me, and they couldn't hurt me. They had bet everything on a murderous plan they thought was perfect, and they had lost absolutely everything in the process. March 22nd dawned with a light rain that gently tapped against the window of my room at Mercy Hospital. It was my 4th day in this safe haven, and every hour that passed further solidified my feeling of having made the right decisions. Patricia entered as usual for the morning checkup, but this time she wore a worried expression I hadn't seen before. "Mr. Morgan, I need to inform you about an incident that occurred during the night," she said as she checked the monitors. "2 people showed up at the reception desk around 2 a.m., claiming to be your children and demanding to see you immediately." My pulse quickened slightly, which was immediately detected by the machines. "What happened?" "Our security staff strictly followed the instructions your lawyer had left. They did not confirm or deny your presence here, and explained that patient information is confidential. They left after a rather heated argument." "Heated argument?" The young woman became very agitated, shouting that she had a right to see her father and that she would sue the hospital for obstruction. The man with her was more controlled but equally insistent. Sandra and Robert had been canvassing Chicago hospitals during the night, probably sleepless, trying desperately to locate me. The mental image of their frantic search gave me a satisfaction I didn't expect to feel. "Is there anything I should be worried about?" I asked. "Not at all. We have reinforced the instructions with all staff. No one will provide information about you without express authorization from your lawyer. We have also alerted security to be especially vigilant." After Patricia left, my phone began its daily routine of calls and messages that I no longer bothered to read completely. However, one of Robert's messages caught my attention because of its different tone. "Dad, we've been looking for you all night. Sandra hasn't stopped crying since yesterday. I know you think we did something terrible, but you need to hear our side. I swear we would never have actually hurt you. Please, give us a chance to explain." It was interesting to watch his strategy shift from threats to pleas, but it was too late for emotional manipulation. At 10 a.m., Martha arrived with a folder full of documents and an expression of professional satisfaction. "I have excellent news," she announced as she settled into the chair by my bed. "The real estate agency already has 3 serious offers for Sandra's property and 2 for Robert's. The prices are above the initial valuations." "So quickly?" "Properties in those locations are highly coveted. Plus, we set competitive prices to ensure quick sales. The Gold Coast condo could close as soon as tomorrow if Sandra doesn't file valid legal objections." "Can she file objections?" "Technically, she could try, but she has no legal basis. The properties were always in your name, and the occupancy agreements were properly canceled with the required notification." Martha opened her folder and showed me photographs she had taken at both properties. "I stopped by the properties this morning with the real estate agents. Interesting what we found." The photographs showed the properties completely empty. Not a piece of furniture, not a decoration, nothing left to indicate anyone had lived there. "They took absolutely everything during the night," Martha continued. "Furniture, appliances, even the light fixtures and curtains that were technically part of the property." "Is that legal?" "Not entirely. Some of those items were permanent fixtures that should have remained. But honestly, it's better this way. It makes the sale easier and shows they've implicitly accepted the cancellation of the agreements." It was typical of Sandra and Robert. Faced with adversity, their first instinct was to take everything they could carry. They hadn't changed at all since childhood, when they would hide toys so no one else could use them. "Where do you think they've moved?" "According to my research, Sandra is staying at her mother-in-law's house in Evanston. Robert is apparently in a hotel near downtown, probably spending the last of the savings he had." My phone vibrated with another message, this time from an unknown number. "Mr. Morgan, this is Mercedes Alvarez, real estate appraiser. Your children hired me last week to appraise your properties. They are claiming the sale process is illegal and that they have rights to the properties. I need to confirm the validity of the documentation they have presented. I showed the message to Martha, who smiled ironically. This is Mercedes Alvarez, the appraiser Robert mentioned in one of the phone calls you recorded. It seems Sandra and Robert are trying to use previous contacts to find ways to stop the sales. Can they do anything? Nothing effective. The property titles are clear and indisputable, but it's interesting they are spending money they don't have on professionals who can't help them. I decided to reply to Mercedes' message directly. Miss Alvarez, I am Arthur Morgan, the sole owner of the properties in question. The individuals claiming to have rights to them were beneficiaries of occupancy agreements that were legally canceled. Any documentation they have presented to you lacks legal validity. My lawyer, Martha Jennings, can provide you with certified copies of the official documentation if necessary. The reply came in less than 5 minutes. Mr. Morgan, I appreciate the clarification. Your children indeed have no documentation to support their claims. I apologize for being contacted under false pretenses. Perfect, I observed, showing the reply to Martha. Now we know they are contacting third parties with false information, trying to create non-existent legal obstacles. It's pure desperation, Martha confirmed. When people lose control of a situation, they often resort to increasingly erratic and ineffective tactics. The phone rang again. This time it was Sandra, calling from another unknown number. I decided to answer, mainly out of curiosity about what new strategy they had developed. Sandra? Dad, thank you for answering. Her voice was hoarse, probably from so much crying and screaming. I need you to know that Robert and I have been talking all night. We realized that what we said in the hospital was horrible and unforgivable. You realize? Yes, completely. We were scared of losing you, and we said terrible things we never would have actually done. But Dad, we're your children. We've made mistakes, but that doesn't mean you should destroy our lives completely. Sandra, planning my murder was not a mistake. It was a calculated, premeditated decision. It wasn't real. We were just talking. People say stupid things when they're scared. Is getting specific poisons from a pharmacist just talking? There was a long pause. I could hear muffled voices in the background, probably Robert advising her on what to say. Dad, about that. Laura, my pharmacist friend, she says she never gave me anything dangerous. She was just playing along because she thought I was joking. It was fascinating to watch them build lies on top of their previous lies, trying to create an alternate reality where their homicidal intentions became dramatic misunderstandings. Sandra, I have every detail of your plan recorded. There is no way to reinterpret it as a joke or a misunderstanding. Then use that recording to understand that we were emotionally distraught. We weren't thinking clearly. You were thinking clearly enough to calculate nurse schedules, administration methods, and inheritance divisions. Please, Dad, we just want to see you and apologize properly. We can rebuild our relationship. There is nothing to rebuild. You chose to see me as an economic obstacle instead of as your father. Now you live with the consequences of that choice. We're not monsters. We're your children who made a terrible mistake. Monsters rarely recognize themselves as such, Sandra. I hung up the phone and reflected on the conversation. There wasn't a shred of genuine remorse in her words, only panic about the financial consequences of her actions. Martha had been listening to the whole conversation. Arthur, that was another excellent documentation of their true motivations. Even in their apologies, they only focus on reversing the financial consequences, not on accepting moral responsibility. The rest of the day passed with more desperate attempts at contact, more creative lies about their intentions, and more evidence that Sandra and Robert were exactly who they had shown themselves to be. People capable of murder when their financial interests were at stake. But I remained safe, protected, and completely in control of my destiny for the first time in years. March 23rd arrived with an unusual silence. For the first time since this nightmare began, my phone didn't start ringing immediately at dawn. The absence of desperate calls was almost more unsettling than the constant barrage of previous days. Patricia came in for the usual medical checkup, but her expression was different. She seemed relieved and worried at the same time. Good morning, Mr. Morgan. I have to inform you that there was another incident last night, but this time more serious than the last. I sat up in bed paying full attention. What kind of incident? Around 11 p.m., the same two people from the previous night returned, but this time accompanied by an older man claiming to be a lawyer. They tried to present a fake court order demanding access to your room. A fake court order? Our security staff is experienced in identifying fraudulent documents. The supposed lawyer couldn't provide valid credentials when asked, and the court order had obvious formatting errors and signatures that were clearly not authentic. Sandra and Robert's desperation had reached levels I hadn't anticipated. They were resorting to forging legal documents, which put them in serious criminal territory. What happened next? Security escorted them off the premises and warned them that any future attempt to enter with fraudulent documents would result in an immediate call to the authorities. The woman had what appeared to be a panic attack in the parking lot. A panic attack? According to the security report, she started screaming that it was unfair, that you were her father, that she had rights. The younger man had to carry her to a vehicle because apparently she couldn't walk on her own. Sandra had reached the point of complete emotional collapse. The image of my daughter being carried by her brother after trying to forge legal documents filled me with a deep sadness, mixed with confirmation that I had made the right decisions. Do you think they'll return? It's possible, but we've implemented additional measures. Their photographs have been distributed to all security personnel, and we have instructions to contact the authorities immediately if they try to enter again with any type of questionable documentation. After Patricia left, I spent a long time looking out the window toward Chicago. Somewhere in this city, Sandra and Robert were living the devastating consequences of their decisions. They had lost their homes, their income, their inheritance, and now they were risking criminal charges for forgery. But I didn't feel sorry for them. I felt sorry for the father I had been, for the naivety with which I had mistaken their apparent affection for genuine love. At 10 a.m., my phone finally rang. It was a number I recognized as belonging to a hotel in downtown Chicago. Dad? It was Robert, and his voice sounded completely different. There was no trace of the arrogance or manipulation that had characterized his previous communications. He sounded defeated. Robert, Dad, Sandra is in the hospital. She had a nervous breakdown last night after what happened at your hospital. She's sedated and can't talk. I'm sorry to hear that, Robert. You're sorry. You caused this. Your sister is destroyed because her own father has completely abandoned her. Robert, Sandra is destroyed because her murder plans failed and she lost access to my money. Not because she lost me as a father. There was a long silence. When Robert spoke again, his voice had changed again. Now it sounded cold, calculating. Fine, Dad. You want to play hardball, we can play hardball too. Is that a threat? It's information. I've been researching the charities that are supposedly getting your inheritance. Did you know the American Cancer Society has controversies about how they use donations? Did you know some executives receive excessive salaries? Robert, you're trying to manipulate me with irrelevant information. Irrelevant? You're going to donate $8 million to organizations that might be wasting money while your own children lose everything they've ever known. My own children plan to murder me. Any charity, regardless of its imperfections, is morally superior to you. Damn it, Dad. We were never going to actually hurt you. It was just a stupid fantasy. A fantasy so detailed it included specific pharmaceutical contacts and precise timing of execution. Fine, yes, we were desperate. You spoiled us so much that we don't know how to live without your money. But that doesn't make us actual murderers. Finally, something resembling honesty. Robert had admitted their dependence on my money was total, and they were desperate. But he still couldn't accept that desperation didn't justify planning homicide. Robert, the fact that you depended completely on my money makes your betrayal even worse, not better. Betrayal? We took care of you. We were with you when Mom died. We kept you company for years. You kept me company because I paid you to. I paid for your properties, monthly transfers, and all your expenses. Your company had a price. That's not true. Isn't it? When was the last time you visited me without asking for money? When was the last time you called just to see how I was, without mentioning some financial need? Another long silence. Robert couldn't answer because we both knew the answer was never. Dad, he continued, his voice softer, I know we made terrible mistakes, but we're family. Families forgive each other. Families forgive infidelity, lies, even minor theft. Families do not forgive premeditated murder plots. It wasn't premeditated, it was desperation. Robert, getting specific poisons from a pharmacist is premeditation. Calculating nurse schedules is premeditation. Planning the division of inheritance after my death is premeditation. Please, Dad, Sandra is in the hospital. I've lost my home. We have nothing. You have exactly what you deserve. We're your children. No. You are two people who share my last name and who turned out to be capable of planning my death for money. The children I raised died the moment they decided my life was worth less than my bank account. Don't say that. It's the truth, Robert. And the truth is, I'd rather donate my fortune to strangers who dedicate their lives to saving others than leave it to relatives who dedicate their lives to planning how to kill me. This isn't over. We're going to fight. We're going to contest everything. We're going to prove you're being manipulated. Good luck with that. You'll need money for lawyers. Money you no longer have because you depended completely on mine. We'll find ways. I'm sure you'll try. But remember, I have recordings of you planning my murder. Any legal battle you start will only result in those recordings becoming public. Those recordings were obtained without our consent. In this state, it's legal to record conversations when you are a participant, or when there is a risk of personal harm. Since you were planning to kill me, I qualify under both categories. I hung up the phone and immediately put it on silent mode. I had no interest in hearing any more desperate attempts at manipulation or more empty threats of legal action they couldn't afford. Martha arrived half an hour later with news that confirmed what I had just heard. Arthur, I have information on Sandra. She is indeed admitted to Northwestern Memorial for an acute nervous breakdown. Apparently, she had a complete collapse last night. Do you know the details? According to the medical reports I could obtain, she's showing symptoms of severe post-traumatic stress, major depression, and suicidal tendencies. She's under psychiatric observation. The irony was bitter. Sandra had planned my death and was now considering her own, all because she had lost access to my money. And Robert? He's staying at the Drake Hotel, but according to my sources, he's already several nights behind on payment. He'll probably be evicted soon if he doesn't get funds. Have they made any real legal attempts to challenge the decisions? They consulted with 3 different law firms, but none would take the case. With no funds for a retainer and no solid legal basis, it's impossible to find professional representation. And the forgeries from last night? That's more serious. I have contacted the authorities about the attempt to use fraudulent documents. They could face criminal charges if the hospital decides to file a formal complaint. Everything was unfolding exactly as I had anticipated. Sandra and Robert had bet everything on a plan they thought was perfect, and now they faced complete ruin. Financial, emotional, and potentially legal. But I remained calm in my room, recovering physically and finding mental peace for the first time in years. They had wanted my death. Instead, they had gotten the death of any relationship that had ever existed between us, and that seemed like perfect justice to me. 6 months later, in September 2024, I was sitting in the garden of the family home in Wisconsin, watching my mother, Dolores Morgan, carefully watering her rose bushes. At 89, she retained a vitality that inspired me daily, and her wisdom had been fundamental during my emotional healing process. Arthur, she said without looking up from her flowers, you have better color in your face than when you arrived here in April. I feel like a completely different person, Mom. And it was true. The decision to move to Wisconsin to care for my mother had turned out to be one of the best I had ever made. The tranquility of this historic town, far from the bustle of Chicago and the ghosts of my previous life, had allowed me to heal both physically and emotionally. The house where I had grown up was still cozy and filled with genuinely happy memories. Dolores had lived alone here since my father's death in 2019, stubbornly refusing any suggestion to move to a retirement home or hire permanent care. I'd rather die in my own bed than live comfortably in a stranger's bed, she had declared with that determination characteristic of women of her generation. During these months, we had developed a perfect routine. I would get up early to make breakfast while she read the newspaper. Then she would tend to her garden while I handled correspondence related to the charitable donations. In the afternoons, we would walk through the historic downtown, or receive visits from neighbors who had known our family for decades. The local community had welcomed me with open arms, without asking uncomfortable questions about why a man my age had decided to return to his hometown after so many years in Chicago. They simply accepted me as Dolores's son who had come back to care for his mother, and that was enough for me. The charities benefiting from my will had been extraordinarily efficient and transparent in handling the funds. The American Cancer Society had used the $3 million to establish a new research center. Mercy Hospital had created a state-of-the-art pediatric oncology unit. The National Cancer Institute had funded 3 promising research projects that were already showing encouraging preliminary results. I received regular reports on the progress of these projects, and each update confirmed that my money was making a real impact on the lives of people I didn't even know. It was a satisfaction profoundly different from anything I had experienced during my years as a businessman. Sandra and Robert's properties had sold quickly, as Martha had predicted. The money from those sales had been added to the donations, increasing the total impact of my decision. Now, instead of funding the parasitic lifestyles of my former children, that money was saving real lives. As for Sandra and Robert, I had kept my promise of no contact. Martha informed me occasionally of their circumstances, more for legal precaution than out of any curiosity on my part. Sandra had remained hospitalized for 6 weeks after her nervous breakdown. Upon discharge, she had moved in permanently with her mother-in-law in Evanston. According to the latest news, she was working part-time at a grocery store and receiving ongoing psychological treatment. Robert had hit bottom more dramatically. After being evicted from the hotel for non-payment, he had temporarily lived in his car until he finally sold it for cash. Eventually, he had found work as a salesman at a used car dealership on the outskirts of Chicago, living in a rented room in a modest neighborhood. Both had attempted multiple legal approaches to challenge my decisions, but as I had anticipated, without financial resources and with no solid legal basis, all their efforts had failed. The last attempt had been in July, when they hired a third-rate lawyer who filed a lawsuit alleging diminished mental capacity on my part. The case was dismissed at the first hearing when the recordings of their homicidal plans were presented as evidence. "What are you thinking about, son?" Dolores asked, approaching where I was sitting. "About how strange it is to feel free after so many years." "Free from what?" "Free from the guilt of not doing enough, of not giving enough, of not being enough for people who were never satisfied with anything." Dolores sat in the chair next to mine, with that natural elegance she had maintained all her life. "Arthur, do you regret the decisions you made?" It was a question I had asked myself many times over these months. "No, Mom. I regret taking so long to make them. And you never feel nostalgic for Sandra and Robert?" "I feel nostalgic for the children they once were, before money corrupted their love. But I feel nothing for the adults they became. That's healthy, son. True love doesn't include letting others destroy us." During these months, I had also developed new, significant friendships. I had joined the volunteer group at the local hospital, where my connections in the medical sector proved valuable for improving their patient care programs. I also participated in a book club and had started taking painting classes, something I had always wanted to do but never had time for. My physical health had improved dramatically. Monthly cardiology checkups showed an exceptional recovery. Dr. Carter, who continued to be my doctor and traveled from Chicago for periodic check-ins, attributed my improvement not just to medication, but to the radical change in my stress levels. "Arthur, your heart numbers are better now than before the heart attack," he had told me during the last visit. "It's extraordinary how peace of mind can impact physical health." At night, when Dolores retired early, I often walked the cobblestone streets of my town, reflecting on the path I had traveled. The betrayal by Sandra and Robert had been devastating, but it had also been liberating. It had shown me that genuine love cannot coexist with greed, and that some relationships are so toxic that eliminating them is the only way to preserve one's own mental health. Rose would have been proud of the decisions I made. During our last years together, she had repeatedly expressed concern about our children's excessive dependence and their lack of personal initiative. "You are loving them to death," she had told me once. I didn't understand the full meaning of her words until I discovered that they were literally willing to love me to my death, if it suited them financially. One afternoon in late September, while organizing charity correspondence at my desk, I found a letter that caught my attention. It was from the American Cancer Society, but the return address was personal, for Mr. Arthur Morgan, from the Gonzalez Ruiz family. I opened it curiously and found a photograph of a little girl, about 8 years old, smiling brightly despite clearly undergoing chemotherapy treatment. The letter read, Mr. Morgan, we are the family of Lucy Gonzalez Ruiz. Thanks to your generous donation, our daughter was able to receive an experimental treatment that was not available in the U.S. until your contribution allowed the necessary technology to be brought here. Lucy is now in complete remission. We want you to know that your money not only saved our daughter's life, but it preserved our entire family. We are strangers to you, but you will have our love and gratitude forever. I had to stop reading for a moment, because tears blurred my vision. This letter represented exactly why I had made the right decisions. My money had saved Lucy's life, had preserved the Gonzalez family's unity, and had created a legacy of genuine love instead of destructive greed. That night at dinner, I read the letter to Dolores. When I finished, we both remained silent for several minutes. Son, she said finally, Rose would be very proud of the man you have become. Mom, I think I finally understand what she was trying to tell me about Sandra and Robert. It wasn't that she didn't love them. It was that she loved them enough not to let them become monsters. Exactly. Sometimes true love requires decisions that seem cruel, but that actually protect the moral integrity of everyone involved. Now, as I write these lines in my personal journal, I can say with absolute certainty that I have never felt more at peace with myself. Sandra and Robert lost a father who loved them unconditionally, but they gained the opportunity to learn to live on their own merits. I lost 2 people I thought were my children, but I gained the freedom to be who I truly am, without manipulation or emotional blackmail. My inheritance now consists of saved lives, preserved families, and a legacy of genuine love that transcends blood relations. And that, to me, seems like the most complete victory I could have ever achieved. If you liked this story, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click the box on the left. Thanks for watching.